Imagine removing just one species from an ocean ecosystem. Not the great white sharks, not the whales, but a humble starfish. Within months, the once vibrant marine community would begin to collapse. Mussels would multiply unchecked, crowding out other species. The delicate balance that took millions of years to evolve would unravel, all because of a single missing species. This is the fascinating world of keystone species. Organisms that play such a crucial role in their ecosystem that their presence or absence can transform entire landscapes. Like the central stone in an arch that keeps everything from tumbling down, these species are the hidden architects of nature's most complex systems. But here's what's truly extraordinary. The most powerful players in nature's grand design often aren't the ones you'd expect. The species that shape our world aren't necessarily the biggest, strongest, or most numerous. Sometimes, they're the ones working quietly behind the scenes, engineering changes that ripple through entire food webs and landscapes. Today, we're counting down 7 remarkable examples that challenge everything we thought we knew about ecosystem dynamics. From the industrious prairie dogs, reshaping America's grasslands, to the mighty sea otters, protecting our coastlines from climate change, these species prove that in nature, true power often comes in unexpected packages. You'll discover how wolves can change the course of rivers, why parrotfish are the architects of tropical paradise, and how a single species of beaver can transform a desert into a thriving wetland. These aren't just stories of individual species. They're windows into the intricate connections that hold our natural world together. So get ready to look at nature through a different lens. Because once you understand the outsized influence of these keystone species, you'll never see ecosystems the same way again. Prairie dogs might look like simple rodents, but these remarkable creatures are the hidden architects of North America's grasslands, and their story reveals just how dramatically a small species can transform an entire landscape. Before European settlement, an estimated 5 billion prairie dogs populated North America's grasslands. Today, that population has plummeted by over 95%, yet even their remaining colonies demonstrate extraordinary ecosystem engineering that would put human architects to shame. A single prairie dog colony can construct vast networks of tunnels extending up to 7 feet deep and covering hundreds of acres. These aren't just simple burrows. They're sophisticated structures that fundamentally alter soil composition and water dynamics. As prairie dogs dig, they mix different soil layers, aerating the earth and incorporating organic matter deep below the surface. This process increases soil nitrogen content and promotes faster grass regeneration rates. A single prairie dog colony can support up to 170 other species. Think about that number for a moment. One small rodent creates habitat conditions that benefit everything from burrowing owls to swift foxes, from salamanders to rare insects. Contrary to what many ranchers historically believed, prairie dogs actually enhance grazing conditions for cattle. Their constant clipping of grasses promotes new growth, resulting in vegetation with higher nutritional content. Studies have shown that grass in prairie dog colonies contains significantly higher levels of nitrogen, making it more nutritious for large herbivores. The colonies themselves become islands of biodiversity in the vast sea of grasslands. Birds of prey use the mounds as vantage points. Black-footed ferrets, one of North America's most endangered mammals, depend almost entirely on prairie dog colonies for both food and shelter. 9 species are completely dependent on prairie dogs for their survival, while over 100 others benefit from their presence. Prairie dogs maintain complex social structures that rival some primate societies. They live in family groups called coteries, use sophisticated vocalizations to communicate everything from predator warnings to individual identification, and even have different dialects between colonies. Prairie dog populations have declined drastically over the past century due to habitat loss, disease, and systematic eradication programs. This decline ripples through the entire ecosystem. When prairie dogs disappear, the species that depend on them begin to vanish as well. Think of prairie dogs as nature's landscape architects, civil engineers, and soil scientists, all rolled into one. Their presence or absence can determine whether a grassland ecosystem thrives or merely survives. As we continue our countdown, keep this in mind. If a creature as small as a prairie dog can fundamentally reshape one of North America's largest ecosystems, imagine what other surprising architects of nature we might discover next. At number 6 on our countdown, we discover one of the ocean's most colorful characters, and perhaps its most important gardener. The parrotfish might look like just another tropical fish, but this spectacular creature is actually responsible for maintaining the health of entire coral reef systems. Oh, and here's something that might surprise you. That white sandy beach you dream about? There's a good chance it was created by these remarkable fish. Let's start with some mind-bending numbers. A single adult parrotfish can produce up to 450 kilograms of sand per year. That's right, sand. How? Using their parrot-like beaks, these fish scrape algae off coral reefs, inadvertently consuming bits of coral skeleton in the process. This coral is ground up in their digestive system and expelled as fine white sand. In places like Hawaii and the Caribbean, up to 70% of white sandy beaches are actually parrotfish droppings. Nature's recycling system at its finest. But creating beach paradise is just their side gig. Their main job? Keeping coral reefs alive. Think of parrotfish as nature's reef gardeners. Without them, coral reefs would be smothered by algae within months. By constantly grazing on algae, parrotfish prevent it from overgrowing and suffocating the coral. It's a delicate balance that's been perfected over millions of years. The impact of removing parrotfish from a reef system is dramatic and swift. In the Caribbean, where parrotfish populations have been severely depleted by overfishing, coral reef coverage has plummeted by more than 50% since the 1970s. Today, only about 1/6 of the original coral cover remains in many areas. The pattern is clear. Where parrotfish disappear, algae takes over, and coral dies. This matters because coral reefs are among the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. When parrotfish populations decline, it triggers a cascade of effects throughout the entire reef community. But where parrotfish thrive, reefs flourish. These fish maintain what scientists call reef resilience, the ability of coral reefs to recover from disturbances like storms or bleaching events. In areas with healthy parrotfish populations, coral reefs are up to 6 times more likely to recover from major disturbances. The relationship between parrotfish and coral reefs demonstrates a crucial principle of keystone species. Sometimes the health of an entire ecosystem depends on seemingly simple interactions. By doing nothing more complicated than eating lunch, parrotfish maintain the delicate balance that keeps coral reef systems alive. As climate change threatens coral reefs worldwide, the role of parrotfish becomes even more critical. These remarkable fish might just be our best allies in protecting one of Earth's most precious ecosystems. They remind us that in nature's complex web, sometimes the most important players are the ones quietly going about their business, one bite at a time. And the next time you're walking on a pristine white sand beach, remember, you might be standing on thousands of years of parrotfish handiwork. In nature, even waste becomes wonder when the right species is doing the job. At number 5, we encounter nature's master landscapers, African elephants. These magnificent creatures don't just live in their ecosystem, they actively shape it, transforming dense woodlands into open savannas and creating habitat mosaics that support countless other species. Their impact is so profound that you can literally see it from space. Let's put this in perspective. A single African elephant moves around 359,000 tons of biomass during the annual migration. That's equivalent to a small construction company operating 24/7. But instead of building structures, these elephants are carefully sculpting entire landscapes to maintain the delicate balance between forest and grassland. What makes elephants true ecosystem engineers isn't just their size, it's their eating habits. Adult elephants consume up to 330 pounds of vegetation daily, pushing over trees, breaking branches, and clearing paths through dense vegetation. While this might look destructive at first glance, it's actually a vital process that prevents woodlands from encroaching on grasslands. Without elephants, many of Africa's iconic savannas would gradually transform into closed canopy forests. But here's where things get really interesting. Elephants are also nature's premier seed dispersal service. They transport seeds up to 65 kilometers from their original source, far further than any other land mammal. Some seeds actually require passage through an elephant's digestive system to germinate properly. The impact of elephant activity creates what ecologists call a habitat mosaic, a complex patchwork of different vegetation types that supports an incredible diversity of life. When we examine satellite imagery of African landscapes, the difference between areas with and without elephants is striking. Areas with healthy elephant populations show a dynamic mix of open grassland and scattered trees. Regions where elephants have been removed often display dense, uniform woodland. These differences persist for decades after elephant removal. This landscape engineering has profound effects on other species. The open spaces elephants create become grazing areas for zebras and wildebeest. Their damaged trees provide nesting sites for birds and homes for insects. Even their footprints collect water during rains, creating miniature wetlands that serve as breeding sites for frogs and other amphibians. However, as elephant populations have declined, with current numbers just a fraction of their historical levels, we're seeing cascading effects throughout African ecosystems. The loss of elephants leads to denser woodlands, reduced grass coverage, fewer pathways for other large herbivores, decreased biodiversity, altered fire patterns, changed carbon storage patterns. Perhaps most remarkably, elephants influence how ecosystems store carbon. By maintaining open woodlands and grasslands, they help create landscapes that are more resilient to climate change and more effective at carbon sequestration than dense forests would be in these areas. We're only now beginning to fully understand the complexities of elephant ecosystem engineering. These animals don't just change their environment, they actively maintain it in a state that benefits countless other species. They're living proof that sometimes the most important conservation work happens naturally, through the daily activities of keystone species that have evolved alongside their ecosystems for millions of years. The story of African elephants reminds us that in nature, destruction and creation often go hand in hand. What might look like damage to human eyes can actually be vital maintenance work that keeps entire ecosystems functioning. As we continue our countdown, remember, sometimes the biggest changes come from species that aren't afraid to throw their weight around. At number 4, we meet nature's greatest civil engineers, creatures so influential they can transform entire watersheds without ever taking a college course. Beavers might seem like simple rodents with a penchant for chewing trees, but their impact on ecosystems is nothing short of revolutionary. Let's start with a startling transformation. In 1995, there was just one beaver colony in Yellowstone National Park. By 2015, there were 19 colonies with 4 active dams. Fast forward to recent surveys, and we're seeing over 127 active beaver colonies. Each of these colonies fundamentally reshapes its surrounding landscape, creating complex wetland ecosystems that support hundreds of other species. But what exactly happens when beavers move into a neighborhood? Their engineering works are remarkable. First, they build dams, but these aren't just simple barriers. A beaver dam is a sophisticated piece of hydraulic engineering that slows water flow, raises water tables, creates deep pools, reduces erosion, filters sediments, improves water quality. The results are dramatic. When beavers return to a landscape, the transformation is visible from space. Satellite imagery shows barren stream channels blooming into lush wetland complexes. These aren't just pretty pictures. They represent fundamental changes in ecosystem function. Consider the numbers. A single beaver dam can retain thousands of gallons of water during peak conditions. This stored water doesn't just sit there, it seeps into the ground, recharging aquifers and maintaining water tables even during drought conditions. In fact, areas with beaver activity often maintain stream flow 40 days longer into the dry season compared to areas without beavers. For fish, those deep pools created behind beaver dams become crucial habitat for juvenile salmon and trout. The complexity of beaver-engineered streams provides essential cover from predators and creates thermal refuges during extreme weather events. For birds, beaver wetlands attract waterfowl in remarkable numbers. Studies show a 393% increase in bat activity around beaver-created wetlands, demonstrating how these engineers create biodiversity hotspots. For water quality, beaver dams act as natural water treatment plants. They trap sediments, filter out pollutants, and reduce nitrogen levels in streams. All services that would cost millions if we had to engineer them ourselves. Recent reintroduction programs have demonstrated just how quickly beavers can restore degraded landscapes. In drought-stricken regions, beaver reintroduction has become a powerful tool for ecosystem restoration. They're nature's answer to climate change adaptation, creating resilient landscapes that better withstand both floods and droughts. The story of beavers teaches us something profound about ecosystem restoration. Sometimes the best solution is to bring back the original engineers and let them do what they've been perfecting for millions of years. Their work isn't just effective, it's free, self-maintaining, and continues 24/7 without any human intervention. As we face increasing challenges from climate change and water scarcity, beavers remind us that nature often has solutions built into its original design. Their engineering works have been tested by millions of years of evolution, and they continue to prove their worth in modern landscapes. So the next time you see a beaver-created wetland, remember, You're looking at one of nature's most sophisticated civil engineering projects. These industrious rodents don't just build dams, they create entire ecosystems, one stick at a time. And in doing so, they demonstrate that sometimes the most effective ecosystem engineers are the ones that work for free. At number 3, we discover how a charming marine mammal quietly helps fight climate change while protecting one of our planet's most productive ecosystems. Sea otters might look like they're just floating around having lunch, but these remarkable creatures are actually maintaining vast underwater forests that capture carbon dioxide on a massive scale. Let's rewind to understand this extraordinary story. Before commercial hunting began in the mid-1700s, an estimated 150,000 to 300,000 sea otters lived along the North Pacific coast. By the early 1900s, they were nearly extinct, with just a few thousand individuals remaining. Picture an underwater forest of kelp stretching from the seafloor to the surface, creating a complex, three-dimensional habitat that supports thousands of species. Now, imagine an army of sea urchins, spiny, hungry creatures that eat kelp at its base. Without control, these urchins can transform a lush kelp forest into an underwater desert, known as an urchin barren. Enter the sea otter, the guardian of this underwater realm. A single sea otter eats about 25% of its body weight daily in sea urchins and other invertebrates. With their incredible dexterity and tool-using abilities, they crack open urchins like we might crack open nuts, keeping urchin populations in check and allowing kelp forests to thrive. The numbers tell a dramatic story. In areas where sea otters are absent, sea urchin populations explode, and kelp forests disappear. When sea otters return, the transformation is remarkable. Research shows that kelp forests guarded by sea otters can sequester between 4.4 to 8.7 megatons of carbon annually, equivalent to the annual CO2 emissions from 3 to 6 million passenger cars. In British Columbia alone, kelp forests protected by sea otters sequester about 8% of the province's annual carbon emissions. Today, while sea otter populations have rebounded in some areas, reaching around 125,000 worldwide, they're still far below their historical numbers. The southern sea otter population in California, for instance, has stalled at around 3,000 individuals. The sea otter story offers a powerful lesson in ecosystem management. Sometimes the most effective solutions to environmental challenges come from restoring nature's original balance. These playful marine mammals remind us that in nature's economy, every species has a role to play, and the impact of that role often extends far beyond what we might initially imagine. As we face the dual crises of biodiversity loss and climate change, sea otters offer hope and inspiration. They show us that by protecting keystone species, we're not just preserving individual animals, we're maintaining entire ecosystems and their capacity to help stabilize our planet's climate. Not bad for a day's work of eating sea urchins. At number 2, we encounter what scientists call the pulse of the Serengeti, the wildebeest migration. While individual wildebeest might not seem particularly remarkable, their collective movement represents one of the most powerful forces shaping an entire ecosystem. We're talking about 359,000 tons of biomass on the move, creating what might be the largest land-based transfer of nutrients on Earth. Picture this: 1.2 million wildebeest, accompanied by 250,000 zebras and 400,000 gazelles, moving in an endless cycle across the Serengeti Mara ecosystem. This isn't just a spectacular wildlife show, it's a massive ecological engine that drives everything from predator populations to soil fertility, from grass regeneration to fire prevention. In the early 1960s, the Serengeti Mara wildebeest population experienced a six-fold increase following the eradication of rinderpest disease. By the 1970s, it stabilized at around 1.3 million animals, a number that remains relatively constant today. However, other wildebeest populations in East Africa tell a more sobering story. The Mara ecosystem's population has plummeted by more than 2/3, from 113,000 in 1977 to just 35,000 by 2009. First, there's their grazing pattern. Wildebeest don't just eat grass, they actively maintain it. Their grazing increases primary productivity, with grazed areas showing a net productivity of 2.6 grams per square meter per day, compared to a net decline of 4.9 grams in ungrazed areas. Then there's the fire prevention aspect. By consuming vast quantities of grass, wildebeest reduce fuel loads across the savanna, naturally preventing the spread of devastating wildfires. This creates a mosaic of habitats that supports an incredible diversity of other species. But perhaps most remarkably, wildebeest serve as living nutrient pumps. As they move, they transport nutrients across the landscape through grazing and, yes, defecation. This process enriches soil, promotes new grass growth, and maintains the productivity of the entire ecosystem. The cascade effects of the migration touch every part of the Serengeti. Predator populations time their breeding to coincide with the migration. Grass species have evolved specific growth patterns in response to grazing pressure. Soil chemistry changes as nutrients are transported and deposited. River systems are affected by the timing and intensity of grazing. Even insect populations fluctuate with the movement of the herds. Satellite imagery reveals the scale of this impact. During migration periods, you can actually see the movement of these megaherds from space, appearing as dark patches moving across the savanna. More importantly, you can observe the recovery of vegetation in their wake, a green wave following the herd's passage. However, this remarkable system faces mounting challenges. Human development, particularly fencing and road construction, threatens to fragment migration routes. In some areas, like the Athi-Kaputier ecosystem, wildebeest migrations have declined by more than 90% due to urbanization and habitat fragmentation. The story of the wildebeest migration reminds us that sometimes the most powerful forces in nature aren't individual species, but collective behaviors that have evolved over millions of years. These great herds don't just move through the landscape, they shape it, maintain it, and ensure its survival for countless other species. As we face a future of increasing habitat fragmentation and climate change, understanding and protecting these mass migrations becomes ever more crucial. The wildebeest aren't just migrating, they're maintaining one of Earth's most spectacular ecosystems, one step at a time. In 1995, scientists attempted something unprecedented. They hoped to heal an entire ecosystem by bringing back a single species. Yellowstone National Park had been without wolves for 70 years, and the landscape showed it. Elk populations had exploded, stream banks were eroding, and the intricate dance of predator and prey that had evolved over millennia had ground to a halt. The reintroduction began modestly, just 14 wolves released into the vast expanse of Yellowstone. By today's count, that population has grown to approximately 140 wolves across the park. What makes wolves our #1 keystone species is the extraordinary way their presence ripples through an entire ecosystem, creating what scientists call a trophic cascade of effects that transforms landscapes from the ground up. First, the wolves changed elk behavior. It wasn't just about reducing their numbers. It was about changing how they moved through the landscape. Elk became more vigilant, spending less time in vulnerable areas like river valleys. This shift in elk behavior triggered a remarkable transformation. Young trees that had been browsed to stubby remnants for decades suddenly had a chance to grow. Aspen, willow, and cottonwood began reaching for the sky. But here's where the story gets truly extraordinary. As riverside vegetation recovered, stream banks stabilized. The roots of new trees held soil in place, narrowing and deepening channels. Water temperatures cooled as shade returned to the streams. The numbers tell the story. 1995, 1 beaver colony in the park. 2004, 7 beaver colonies. 2015, 19 beaver colonies. By 2007, over 127 active beaver colonies. Each beaver colony further transformed the landscape, creating deep pools and wetland habitats that attracted new species. Fish populations rebounded, with some areas seeing a 170% increase in steelhead trout numbers. The wolves' influence extended far beyond predator-prey relationships. Scavenging species like ravens, eagles, and bears benefited from wolf kills. Coyote populations decreased, allowing small mammal populations to recover. Plant diversity increased in areas where elk browsing decreased. Soil composition changed as new vegetation patterns emerged. This cascade of effects demonstrates something profound about ecosystem health. Sometimes the most powerful forces in nature aren't the most obvious ones. By restoring a single keystone species, we didn't just bring back wolves, we restarted natural processes that had evolved over thousands of years. Today, Yellowstone serves as a living laboratory, teaching us about the complex web of relationships that maintain healthy ecosystems. The wolf reintroduction story challenges our traditional approach to conservation. As we face global challenges like climate change and biodiversity loss, the Yellowstone wolf story offers hope and direction. It suggests that by identifying and protecting keystone species, we might be able to restore not just individual species, but entire ecosystems. The wolves of Yellowstone teach us that in nature, everything is connected. Change one element, and you change the entire system. They show us that true power in an ecosystem isn't about size or strength. It's about relationships, connections, and the delicate balance that keeps our natural world functioning. Our countdown of keystone species reveals a crucial truth. In the intricate web of life, some threads hold more weight than others. Understanding and protecting these vital species isn't just about conservation. It's about maintaining the complex systems that make our planet habitable. Perhaps the most remarkable lesson from our journey through keystone species is how nature magnifies influence. The right species in the right place can transform entire landscapes, not through brute force, but through the subtle power of ecological connections. Think about it. A modest-sized rodent can determine whether a prairie thrives or withers. A fish that spends its day nibbling algae shapes the destiny of coral reefs. A single wolf can trigger changes that alter the course of rivers. In nature's economy, true power isn't about size or strength. It's about relationships and interconnections. As you consider what you've learned today, ask yourself, how did the reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone affect river systems? Can you explain the cascade of events that led from predator to waterway? Which keystone species demonstrated the most surprising or unexpected impact on their ecosystem, and why? How might understanding keystone species change our approach to conservation efforts? If you had to identify a potential keystone species in your local ecosystem, what characteristics would you look for? These aren't just academic questions. As we face unprecedented environmental challenges, understanding how keystone species maintain ecosystem health could be key to preserving and restoring our natural world. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are already there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to recognize their importance. Remember, in nature, everything is connected, and sometimes the species that matter most are the ones you'd least expect.